I did want to pay a little tribute to my mentor and friend. I don't know why this is not working. There it is. This is Dr. Robert Hunter. And when I started in the field, I started working at the Problem Gambling Center. They've replicated his treatment center for problem gambling in other parts of Nevada. There's a problem gambling Reno you might know of. There's problem gambling in Australia, South Korea, and a number of other places that have come through there. We had delegates from China coming in and touring our facility, looking at our intervention styles and the treatment modality. As you can imagine, there's a Macau, a Mirage casino in Macau, So as gambling has been more prolific, more casinos, the industry has grown, so has the problem with addiction. So unfortunately, we lost Dr. Hunter last week. He passed away. He was with his family, and I did want to, because I thought the timing was so interesting, because I was thinking about a topic to come up with. Here's Dr. Hunter with his wife, Lynn, which I knew well. She came into the center all the time. She was at our meetings. There's an obituary page if you'd like to look at it off the RJ. A nice little kind of story about his life. So there's his family that she was always with. And he was a great man, and he meant a lot to me. And I tell you right now, I wouldn't be the counselor I am today. I wouldn't be a professional I am today without his guidance and expertise. He was a great mentor to me and a good friend. And every time we were anywhere, he always spoke very highly of me to other professionals to help, help my reputation, to help my confidence. And so I hope that when I deal with you and you deal with professionals that you bring in, that you remember that kind of compassion, understanding, acceptance is so important to help cultivate people, and not only with your patients, but as providers too. So this is the proclamation signed by the governor for this month, March 1st, being Problem Gambling Awareness Month. It's that important. It's really interesting to see. One of the great things that in Nevada, we have a revolving account through the state. So every video poker machine that is licensed in the state of Nevada, $2 of that money is set aside for treatment. I think it's about $2 million this year. But you think that's a lot of money, but it goes fast in treatment, especially spread out over the entire state. We're dealing with folks in the north and the south. There are residential programs that are very expensive to be at, but also to pay for the facilities, the counselors, and the programs. But it's a nice model. It's something I hope to see in other states. Sorry, that's my email. What I'd like to do, because Dr. Hunter's up here and I don't want to run out of time, there's 2 short videos that I'd like to introduce. Maybe I'll do that after I get through the lecture. It's hard. There we go. Okay. So the topic today is understanding pathological gambling. One of the reasons I like to spend a little time on this topic is because a lot of people don't believe that gambling is a problem. Or it's like shopping, or, and while it is in a sense, these machines learn how we play. They understand our thresholds for frustration, and they adapt to that over time. So, everybody has that player card, right? When you put that into a machine, it's tracking your decision-making patterns. So it isn't just the one-arm band and old mechanical machine that would pay out every so with odds. Yeah, those odds are there, but they can fluctuate. There's a whole system, a network of computers that are working in tandem with that gambler's behavior. So it isn't as simple as that. And I would like it I would liken problem gambling like we would look at drugs and alcohol over time. They were kind of natural phenomenon, and then they were refined into very potent chemicals that had potential for addiction. Like, Native America, or excuse me, natives in South America would chew the coca leaves while they were hunting. That would kind of give them a little pep. But that's not the same thing as crystalline powder, cocaine. It has a much more quicker way of getting into the bloodstream by snorting it. That's the fastest way to get anything in your system. Glenn knows this because he's a nurse. If you spread out the lungs, it's a huge surface area that you can get into when you take a deep inhalation, and that gets into the bloodstream immediately. That's how we get oxygen in our bloodstream. So if you're taking a substance that way, a lot of people think injection is the fastest way to get something in your bloodstream, but actually inhalation is actually quicker. So prevalence rates for problem gambling, 2.2% nationally. That's doesn't seem like a lot. This is an old statistic, but that's over 7 million people. So think about 7 million people that are gambling to a pathological degree. And this is, spending rent money, spending money for children's food, spending money for your car payment, insurance, child support, healthcare. So problem gambling can become regressive to other economies. It eats money that you would spend for something else. Let's say like a vacation or a safe home or, transportation, things that you need that you'll go without because of the level of gambling that's happening. About 20% of people in the general population that have a substance abuse disorder have at least one other independent mood disorder. So co-occurring disorders, like we like to call them, they're existing in tandem. They're playing off one another. So give an example is that every time Glenn comes to work, because just for an example, we don't get along. And he feels threatened. He gets anxious. So he pops out, jumps in his truck, and goes down to Terrible's and gambles a few dollars to not have to think about his anxiety or unsafe work environment. So he's using his anxiety, he's using gambling to mitigate or cope with his anxiety. But the gambling creates another problem for him too, because it's eating his income. And also, the more he does it, the more likely he is to use that to cope. We all know this, like when we watch a scary movie, we like to do this, right? Popcorn, chocolate, you're double doping, so to say. But a lot of times when people can use what we call maladaptive coping that creates more problems. If it's adaptive coping, if it's healthy coping, people might find a different way. He could confront me. He could say, Oscar, sometimes the way you talk to me frustrates me, and I wish you'd be more sensitive to my feelings. It's a professional work environment, and I appreciate that. And we'd have a nice handshake, and we go on our way. That's one way. Teaching people social skills so they can be efficacious in their interpersonal interaction. He could tell my boss, rat me out. That's what you wanted to do, Glenn. Glenn and I have a great working relationship, so I like to tease him. So co-occurring disorders are commonplace among those seeking treatment for pathological gambling. 86% sampled had at least one of the 4 targeted psychological disorders. So of the ones that they screened, because we didn't screen for all of them, 86%. What's that tell you? That if you're working with a pathological gambler, there's a very high prevalence that they have a co-occurring disorder. And you cannot just treat that disorder, substance use, pathological. You need to be aware of other issues that are going on, and you need to refer them out. This happens all the time in the medical field. Glenn, you have a patient comes in for, let's say, heart palpitation, and they report they have diabetes, and maybe they have some symptoms. You're not going to just treat their heart condition. You're going to treat the whole individual, right? Okay, let's say they have some abscesses on their foot from diabetes. Would you ignore that? No. You would, you would recommend care maybe to a different specialist. I don't exactly know. I'm not in the medical field, but I would imagine there might be a specialist for those kinds of things, right? Surgery, something, some kind of intervention. So think of it that way. Don't forget about this, because treatment, a lot of times treatment providers specialize. We have agencies where they get money specifically to work with gambling or substance abuse. and they forget about the other things. It's our job as professionals, even if we're not qualified to treat that, we can refer out to a specialist who can, right? And just because you have a major mental disorder doesn't mean that you don't need help for something else. And that doesn't mean you don't need help for problem gambling too. This is so important. I saw this time and time again when I was working in treatment centers, that we would just focus on what we were dealing with. And then, of course, they drop out of treatment because their other symptoms are causing complications with the other. You know, it's like if you come to school and you're hungry and tired, what's the likelihood that you're going to be able to concentrate? You're not. So I'm not going to ignore that. That's why we kind of have study instructions to tell kids, hey, it's a good idea to eat breakfast before you come to school. Make sure you get enough sleep. Because if they're not getting proper nutrition, proper rest, their education is suffering. You can't ignore one problem because we'll say, well, that's not my specialty. It doesn't matter. We need to recognize. Otherwise, our efforts fail and we become frustrated with our clients because we're not meeting their needs. Now, we may not be able to meet their needs, but we can help them find resources so they can. So right now we're going to look at a kind of evolution of how problem gambling, the attitudes professionally have changed towards it. And specifically, we're going to look at the DSM-4, text revision 4, versus the DSM-5, which is the current diagnostic and statistical manual for mental health disorders. So in 1994, we had a pathological gambling categorized as an impulse control disorder, not otherwise grouped in any specific condition. It was also grouped in with intermittent explosive disorder, that's like, you know, just rage, kleptomania, and pyromania. So they thought, oh, this problem gambling issue is just like these other disorders, but it's not true. You can tell, like everyone's like frowning, like, are you really? Now think about the computer that you're using today. This is one example. This is an iPhone 7. I don't want to get a new one because, I don't know, I'm addicted to new phones. And that's a computer from 1994. Now, you wouldn't go in with your understanding knowledge of science, research, and clinical practice from that era. We have learned a lot about neurological interaction with individuals and their environments. We have learned a lot about how addictions develop. I would tell you back in this time that we probably didn't think about co-occurring disorders very often. But now I'm talking about, if you take any one of my classes, you're going to read about it. You're going to read about all the things you need to know to work in clinical practice. And you know why? Because I'm a clinician. And I've been in the field. And I still practice in the field. Limited, I spend more time teaching than I do. But it's so important that we stay active because you don't want somebody that was in clinical practice 20, 30 years ago. They're not going to be up to date on their skills, knowledge, and understanding, and be able to provide students with the best knowledge and understanding. So in the DSM-3, problem gambling was added in 1980, largely to do some efforts from Dr. Custer, who, Dr. Hunter, my mentor, he worked directly with him. Actually, some of our treatment documents actually had Dr. Custer's name on it. So when I was doing the research. So bringing us up to 2013 and the DSM-5. Now the DSM is what? Kim, what is it for?
Diagnosis. What does it stand for? Or what is it for? Diagnosis and tongue-tied. Diagnostic and Statistical Manual.
Of?
I don't know.
Mental disorders.
Mental disorders.
Number 5, not number V.
Yeah.
I think I have number V though. So what that is a collection of samples for populations that helps us explicate mental disorders. Now, do you notice that? So that's our, in mental health, forgive the euphemism, our Bible, right? That's what we go to figure out what's wrong with you in terms of mental illness. That's just to diagnose you. To fix you, that's completely different, right? It's like people get cancer. They get cancer for all kinds of reasons. That doesn't really tell you how to fix it, does it? So the diagnosis is important, but it doesn't stop there. And we don't want people to kind of keep their diagnosis even if they're not currently showing symptoms. That's so important too. because I know a lot of addictions treatment has come from an outgrowth of Alcoholics Anonymous. And those AA, GA, and NA, and all these support groups, which are very helpful, they're peer support groups, but that's not the same thing as clinical work. I want to make a clear distinction on that. It doesn't mean that I don't support them. I do. I refer a lot of my clients to these things in tandem. But so we don't go on, we don't say you're an alcoholic. We don't say you're a drug addict. We don't say you're a junkie. We say you are suffering from a substance use disorder or alcohol use disorder or pathological gambling disorder, because it shows a level of respect that we have for our patients. I hear a lot of people say that, well, I'm an alcoholic. Okay, that's fine. You want to call yourself whatever you want, that's okay. But as a clinician, I do not refer to you in that way. We have a professional nomenclature that we use from our professional lexicon to describe certain conditions, and that's what we're going to use, and I expect all of you to do that. You don't say, oh, my schizophrenic. You say an individual who suffers from schizophrenia, okay? It sounds small, but it's important. I'm getting a little off topic, but I'm really passionate about that because it irritates me when people talk like that. Because the most important tool you have in working with somebody in addictions is yourself. Your ability to connect with them. Your ability to accurately reflect your understanding of their experience and empathize. And if you're not able to do that, you'll tend not to be able to help them towards change. They come from a world of judgment, a world of guilt, a world of shame. We are not here to add to that. If we are, if Kim's patients leave feeling like she judged them every time, what makes you think they're going to come back? They're not. And these negative attitudes that we have, that we look at as a moral issue, even though we do have laws that enforce certain moral norms, this we understand is a mental illness, and we need to treat it as such. Just like you don't shame somebody for having a physical condition like diabetes. I don't know anything else except diabetes. Or COPD. You're not going to shame them, even if some of their behavior lends itself to that. Smoking, working in a mine, all kinds of things. But that really has nothing to do with how we're going to help them access services and provide treatment, right? So in the DSM-5, it's been reclassified. We got pathological gambling alongside other addictions. We've also lowered the threshold for symptoms and removed illegal acts as a criterion for the disorder. So a lot of times you had to have that as to meet criteria, where a lot of people never broke the law, but a lot of times it gets to that. Wow, that is not helpful. Can anybody read that? No. Okay, let's see if I can do something. That's a little bit helpful. Oh, there you go. Can you guys read? There we go. So let's go through the criterion quickly. I don't want to run out of time. What time do we have till? We got about 45 minutes, 2:30. So, so DSM-5, diagnostic criteria for problem gambling. Persistent and recurrent problem gambling behavior leading to clinically significant impact or distress as indicated by the individuals exhibiting 4 or more of the following in 12-month period. Okay, so if you exhibit 4 or more of these symptoms within 12 months, you meet criteria for pathological gambling. What if you don't have these symptoms for 12 months or more? You do not meet criteria for pathological gambling. So I know that sounds like common sense, but a lot of people will say, well, I'm a pathological gambler. And they'll say, I'm a pathological gambler for the rest of my life. Well, have you gambled? Not in 30 years. Okay, so, you know, for some people, I've worked with a lot of people in recovery, and they'll say, I say that to remind myself I can never do that again. Other people, I don't like the label. It just kind of depends. But as a clinician, that's what we go on. Okay, we don't go on people's history. So here, let's just start with the symptoms here. Need to gamble with increased amounts of money in order to achieve desired excitation. Okay, that increased amounts of money in order to achieve desired excitement. So when you're gambling, When you use drugs and you use them for a while, what'd you say, Michael? Tolerance. You develop tolerance. So you have a drink one day and you get a little buzz. And then the next day, I drink one and I get a little buzz. And the third day, I drink one and I don't really feel anything. Because my hepatic function, my cardiovascular system is compensating. It's used to this poison I'm putting in my system, so it's trying to compensate for it by producing extra enzymes, extra blood flow, all kinds of different physiological functions are increased in order to compensate for that. In problem gambling, tolerance is by increased risk. You see that in sex addiction too. So they might start like by masturbating to internet porn. And then it might go from kind of normal, what we call normal sex, to weird sex, to really weird sex. And we'll see that increase. And I've seen it to the degree where I've seen people with addictions to sex where they're looking at child porn, where they tell me, I don't even know why, that's not something I've ever been interested in, but the tolerance psychologically, neurochemically has increased. They're using this behavior to manipulate their neurochemicals in their brain, just like a drug introduced into the system will get into the central nervous system and manipulate the neurochemicals. So while it's not a drug you're taking, you're using a behavior that manipulates that physiological interaction. Is that clear? I know it might sound like a lot, but it's important to understand that. And when you can explain this to your clients, a lot of their guilt and shame can be alleviated to say, holy crap, this is a really dangerous behavior that looks very innocuous on the outside. Millions of people gamble all the time and they seem to be okay with it, but I can't, because the way it affects my specific psychological genetic makeup, it has a great impact on me and it makes me do things that I wouldn't normally do. That isn't to say they're not responsible, but that comes later. Okay, so symptom number 2 is restless or irritable when attempting to cut down or stop gambling. You know, try to go out without carbs for 4 days. That's what you feel like, okay? I want to rip somebody's head off. I think I tried like a no carb diet once, and I never do this. I was in the grocery store with an open bag, just like walking. This is not going to work. This is crazy. This is carbs. What does it feel like to detox off of heroin? I'm like, carbs, Pringles. Come on. Okay. Next symptom, has made repeated unsuccessful efforts to control, cut back, or stop gambling. So they say, I'm not going to gamble anymore. I'm going to give my paycheck to my wife, and then I'm going to pawn this watch and then get the money and go gamble. This kind of behavior is often preoccupied with gambling, having persistent thoughts of reliving past gambling experiences, playing to the next venture, thinking of ways to get money. We call this drug-seeking behavior, right? We see it all the time, and it sure motivates the hell out of people who are addicted to things. They'll say, well, gee, when I work with people who've had serious addictions, I'm like, you're one motivated person if you're given the right stimuli. All we do have to do is point somebody in the right direction, and they'll just go. Which is amazing, because a lot of people don't think, well, I don't really do. Well, just because you've been chasing drugs for 35 years doesn't mean you can't do anything else. Right. We just need to point you in the right direction. And boy, they go. And they have a lot of skills. And a lot of times it's our job as clinicians to help them identify, what are some of your skills? Nothing. I don't have any, like, okay, let's break down some of the behaviors. Can you see how you can be very persistent if you want to? You can solve problems. You know, somebody told me, there was a friend of mine who was working, and she said, if you drop me off in a helicopter in the middle of the desert, I can find crystal meth. she was serious. Like, I could find, and she was saying, like, I will find a way. And that's how your recovery is too. You got to find a way. That's how life is. Life is a series of choices that we make, responsible or not, that guide us to our destiny. And whether you decide on, I make thousands of decisions every day to get here, to be here in front of you. And so do you, to be students. And if once you do one thing that is positive and beneficial to you, you just do the next thing. And then all of a sudden you have a lifetime, a life milieu of positive experiences that you created from your personal decisions. A lot of times people don't believe that, but we have to help them. We have to help show them hope that they can, even though in spite of the fact that they had some serious setbacks and problems, And sometimes they were their fault and sometimes they weren't, but it doesn't really matter. Today is today. What are we going to do now? Okay, often gambles when feeling distressed, helpless, anxious, guilty. Often loses money gambling, often returns another day to get even. We call that chasing. Chasing one's losses. Lies to conceal the extent of involvement with gambling. So you're lying to your family, friends, loved ones. That chasing behavior, you're like, okay, I borrowed money from the till at work and I need to make this money back. So then you make it back and you're like, oh, I got $1,000, I took 500. But because I'm not using my rational brain, they've shown decreased blood flow into the prefrontal cortex. It's what we use to make good decisions, right? And they'll say, but I can make another 1,000 if I did it right. But odds aren't that way. Statistics not that way. Have you seen the casino? There's a fountain that shoots off every hour that costs like $1 million a day to run. Okay, I knew this when the Mirage opened back in 1995. I think I was just getting out of high school. They have to bring in $1 million a day, 1 million to break even. There is a river of money flowing through those casinos, and they're all over the place, and here too in our locales. And it's because they know how to get people to part of their hard-earned money. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Has jeopardized or lost a significant relationship, job, or education or career opportunity because of gambling? When I was at UNLV, I saw a lot of young guys addicted to gambling. I'd see them for the first couple weeks of class. And then they get their student loan money and they were gone. Because you know what? All they got to do is they'll make it up, right? Just a night of blackjack and you pay off your student debt. This way of rationalizing things with really fuzzy logic gets people into big trouble. Same thing with drug addiction. You'll see it all the time. Same thing if you want something so bad, you'll stop thinking clearly about it. You'll just find a way to make it believe that it's worth it. You see this in relationships, codependent relationships. If I just stick with it and he promised he won't beat me again, this is the same kind of neurological process and faulty logic that gets in emotional thinking that gets us into these problems. On average, I know I'm kind of going off topic here, but on average, somebody's in a psychologically, geez, that's probably off the charts, abusive relationships, 7 times to leave. Somebody getting beat still takes 7 times to leave. Think about how crazy that sounds. But at the same time, it is the same kinds of processes, coping, neurological impact on the behavior. I want you guys to really understand the neurobiology behind addiction and how it's related to a lot of other unhealthy behaviors. It's not just one thing. But we like to look at everyone and say, see what they do over there? Because it makes us feel better about not looking at the things that we do, right? Relies on others to provide money to relieve desperate financial situations. We call that, what do we call that? Rescuing people or, yeah, it's enabling. And we used to call it something else. I can't remember in the gambling world. Yeah, but definitely you're enabling that behavior. Gambling behavior is not better explained by a manic episode. So sometimes, if you guys are familiar with bipolar, you vacillate between mania, you're really up on top of the world, your logic isn't that great, but you feel wonderful, and then you swing to depression. Sometimes people in manic episodes will act very uncharacteristic of their normal personality, their normal persona. And you'll see them go on gambling binges, sex binges, drug and alcohol binges, and then they'll kind of come down. So the idea is that if they don't meet criteria for another disorder, then it's not otherwise explained. Does that make sense? So there is not like, I have got bipolar and pathological gambling. Oh, it looks like it's their mania state that has created this and mimicked the symptoms of pathological gambling. Okay? Or they're using drugs that might induce that. There are a number of pharmaceutical drugs used for different types of conditions like Parkinson's that have been known to increase people's gambling. So that's something to screen for too, especially when you're working with elderly patients, because we know a lot of older people gamble, right? Because they have time and money. Okay, and then there's specifiers for, come on. So the specifier is you meet criteria for pathological gambling, and then in early remission is after full criteria for problem gambling disorder was met. None of the criteria for gambling disorder has been met for at least 3 months, but less than 12 months. So then you would say, pathological gambling, early remission. Sustained remission, after full criteria for problem gambling disorder were previously met, none of the criteria for problem gambling disorder have been met during a 12-month period or longer. So important that we change our clinical diagnosis and update it, because things change. Their condition change. Just because you were sick doesn't mean you're still sick, okay? This also gives people some hope, like you're getting better. When you go to the doctor, don't you want him to tell you if you're doing better or worse? Yes. So as a clinician, we need to do that. We should be doing 30, 60, 90-day follow-ups and adjust their chart accordingly and let them know. The severity specifier, if you meet 4 to 5 criterion, that's a mild severity for pathological gambling. If you meet 6 to 7, that's moderate, and then 8 to 9, severe. That makes sense to everybody? Simple. You'll notice that if you've looked at substance use disorders, this mirrors substance abuse symptoms. The wording's a little bit different to focus on the substance use. Okay, so there's a lot of things that people don't understand about pathological gambling, especially if you haven't worked in that world. And I'll tell you, when I first started going back to school to become a counselor, I took a problem gambling class, and they brought in somebody who had been in recovery for problem gambling, and I just asked the guy, I said, okay, so was there an amount of money that you could win that would make you stop gambling? This is my thinking, right? Like, people gamble to make money, or to win money. He's like, no, I didn't gamble to win, I gambled to gamble. And when I understood that, I could understand why the behavior could be so problematic. That's like people who eat too much. They're not, my friend tells me, I'm going to eat my emotions today. He's like, he's having a bad day and he's going to get like a double cheeseburger and kill it. Because why? That pleasure, that dopamine release counteracts the negative psychological feelings in your mind. It works. That's why people do it. That's why you can eat a whole bag of Doritos, but not a whole bag of carrots, right? After the first raw carrot, you're like, I'm good. I'm good for carrots for like a month, okay? But Doritos, I mean, literally could eat the whole bag if I wanted to. I mean, even if I don't want to, because there's crack cocaine in Doritos. I don't know. So important that we understand that the gambler, that the individual with pathological gambling is gambling to escape their psychological distress. Now, I get paid on Friday. I go home. My wife's yelling at me. The rent hasn't been paid. The lights hasn't been turned off. No problem, honey. I'm going to take my paycheck. I'm going to go down to Terrible's. I'm going to cash it. I'm going to swing by, what's the power company out here?
Valley Electric.
Valley Electric. I'm going to pay the bill. I'm going to get a money order for the rent. It's all good.
When you went to Terrible's.
Yeah, I walked into Terrible's, and I never walked out with a penny, right? And then I said, you know what? They know I'm good for it. I'm going to go get a mark from the casino. They're going to loan me $1,000. And I never understood why a business, like, would you loan somebody with a drug addiction money? Would you loan somebody with a problem gambling addiction money? No. But if you were the casino, it's Disney dollars. It never leaves the casino, right? You go get a mark from the casino, $1,000 to what? To go buy a car? To pay? No, to gamble. It's chips. It doesn't have value outside of that casino. So then you leave after your paycheck's gone, and you have a $1,000 mark at like a 27% interest, right? And they'll get you. They're lawyers. They'll go overseas. People in China come visit here, and then they're like, "Oh, we're gonna go home." Well, my friend used to work in the legal department at Bellagio, and he's like, "Oh yeah, we'll chase it down. We got international treaties. We got all kinds of ways to get in this money. There's agreements between governments because this is a serious problem. I mean, you can get a lot of but what was the money? None of it is real. Does that make sense? So now you've got your paycheck plus your bills plus this. Now you're really anxious, right? You're trying to find a way. Maybe I'll take some money out of, if I've got access to funds from work. Maybe I could sell something. Maybe I could steal something. Maybe I can pawn my wife's wedding ring before she knows it's pawned and get it back by the end of the night. And, this is the kind of thinking. And then Nicole was talking about somebody who came in, or not Nicole, Leanne, said that problem gambling, or pathological gambling, is one of the highest prevalence for suicide. So it's very important we keep our eye on them for that. Because they got all these things, and they're like, you know what? You know what's a nice, easy way out of all my problems? Yeah, just commit suicide. So it's so important that we know the signs and symptoms for suicide, that we have, the state of Nevada has mandated that all mental health providers in any domain, problem gambling, substance abuse counselors, mental health counselors, marriage and family therapists, social workers, psychologists, psychiatrists, all have to take a suicide training course now, because people would walk out of their office off themselves and they're like, well, what did the counselor do? I don't know. Well, I wasn't trained. Well, you should have been. Okay. And if you take my one-on-one class, you are. It's in 101. And you're going to get it in every other class that you take down along the line. And then when you're licensed professional, you're going to take it again. Because you can't just, it's like any kind of profession. You got to practice to remember. You got to keep your skills up. Professional basketball player doesn't get there and be like, I'm done, I made it. He's practicing every day. And as clinicians too, we're keeping ourselves up to date on our skills and our knowledge and our understanding of how things have changed. And it's a burden, but it's our burden. So, okay. We're doing okay on time. I talked about this already, so we don't spend too much time. It's hallmarks of addictive behavior are escape and numbing. So escaping your emotions, numbing your emotions. We do this in all kinds of ways. We do it by binge watching Netflix, right? I didn't do any of my homework. Makes me anxious. Professor Sheet is going to be very disappointed. That makes me feel bad. You know what made me feel good? Watching Netflix for 3.5 hours. And then when you're done, what happens? You feel worse, right? So what do you want to do? Watch some more Netflix or go get a pizza or do anything but your homework, right? And then you email me at 11:58 and say, my computer's not working or something, or I was attacked by a poltergeist and you could just give me till Tuesday, I'll get it in. I'm like, and sometimes I'll let you do it, sometimes I won't. It just depends on how I feel. They have shown studies that if a professor or a teacher eats before they grade, they give better grades. So if I'm waiting, which I typically do, I do a lot of my grading, and you'll see it. All of a sudden, I'm just ramming through, right? You must get like a million. I don't even know how it works, but I'm like, oh, I'm behind on grading. And I wait to eat. I'm like, I'll have breakfast after I'm done grading. No, I should eat because I'm going to give you guys grades. So, okay. Yeah. Exactly. That's why you bring an apple. I'm getting a little feedback here. If you could if you could mute yourself so we don't get that feedback. Thank you. Okay. So this is Natasha Schull. She's a professor out of MIT and a problem gambling researcher. She came to Las Vegas and basically just camped out. Hey, somebody is making noise. Please mute your microphone. Thank you. Okay, I'll do it. Okay, so she wrote a book called, what's it called now? Sorry, I got a little flustered there. Addiction by Design. If you get a chance to read it, it'll blow you away. It's basically how the gaming industry has developed games, environments, conditions to induce people to gamble as long as possible. And one of the quotes I read from the book, she's really fascinating to watch. There's a 60 Minutes interview with her that you'll watch in one of my classes. Yeah, you've probably seen it. And I emailed her one time. I'm a little professor from Basic College, and she's from MIT, big shot. Sends me an email like within 5 minutes, and she's like, "Oh yeah, that's this," and she gave me a whole manuscript from her book before she had finished it, because I was asking some questions, she goes, maybe this will help you out. And it did. It had a lot of research in it. So really great human being, nice, very kind, professional, amenable. But, and the quote from the book is, whether or not it's people's their intention, the gaming industry is designing machines that can addict people. Okay, so you take that, okay, sorry. I don't know why it's doing that. Is everyone getting seasick? I am. Okay, there we go. So this guy is, I forget his name, Dr. Schaefer from Harvard Medical School, and he was in that same interview that you watched in 60 Minutes, and the reporter's really giving him a go. She's like, you said that video poker is the crack cocaine of gambling. And he said, yeah, I did say that. And she said, but you're saying that machines don't addict people. Now, Natasha Schull at MIT is saying they do. He's saying they don't. They're both right, okay? Because we know that how many people gamble and are not pathological gamblers? Some people, it does addict, right? You could say that, but not everybody. And you know, they used to be this big campaign back in the 80s, Ronald Reagan era, just don't do it. If you just don't do drugs, you'll be fine. That didn't really work. People are using drugs more than ever, right? So that's really not the way to help. And also, a lot of people were using drugs and they weren't addicted. I'm not recommending people use illicit drugs to deal with their problems. But we know a lot of people use alcohol too, and they're not addicted to alcohol. I have a nice 12-year scotch every once in a while. I'm not addicted to scotch. I can see how it can become problematic, especially if you use it in tandem. So the new thinking is that this one thing doesn't make me do it. It is a constellation of other stressors that create the environment where addiction can flourish. I don't know why I did that. Okay. So when we're working with addictions, and if it's not one thing that makes you addicted, it's a lot of different things like poverty, psychological stress, psychological sustained trauma, physical illnesses, mental illnesses. I can go on and on and on. But what it is it creates risk factors, genetic components. Maybe you have a history of pathological gambling or addiction in your family. We know that some of the D2 receptors in people's neurons, they seem to be kind of amped for picking up dopamine, so that those folks show significantly higher prevalence for addiction. Not all of them get addicted, because not all of them have all the other symptoms. When you have HIV, okay, you contract this virus, it can develop into AIDS, right? AIDS is an autoimmune disorder syndrome. So from HIV, which has wrecked your immune system, your autoimmune system, which protects you from other illnesses, you have complications related to that, and you suffer from a syndrome, a cluster of different things, very common skin disorders, bronchitis, I don't know, what's something that's complicated? Pneumonia. People die from pneumonia because they don't have the white blood cells to fight off the illness. Addiction is the same thing. It's a syndrome model now. This is what we're finding out, and a lot of some really good research. If you put it all together, you take Natasha Schull and you take, what's his name from Harvard, and you put them together, and you're going to find the truth. And we're truth seekers as researchers, as clinicians. We are not going to just say, well, this is the way I feel about it, and this is how I'm going to speak about it. We need to find, and the truth changes because we have a deeper understanding over time of things. Okay, so I talked about a cluster of symptoms related to these syndromes. And some other risk factors are being young, because your brain's not done developing yet. right? So you don't have full faculties of your prefrontal cortex. Now, any 12-year-old or 13-year-old tell you they know everything, right? And they think they do. And I remember thinking, man, everyone's done with me. What is going on with the world? But they have not developed. And then they start using drugs at that age. And then that interferes with psychological development, right? Because instead of me getting kicked off the basketball team because I did something wrong, and I deal with my thoughts and feelings about it when I'm 14 years old, or maybe I grab a girl's butt in the hallway and she slaps me and I get suspended from school. Instead of learning that because I went out and got high, so I didn't feel the shame, guilt that came with it, the social rejection, I skip over that development. Well, guess what? You don't get to skip over it. You're still there. And then you come into my treatment center and you're 35 years old now, and now you're dried out, and you say, how come I act like I'm 14? That's a good question. Let me help you understand that you have not mastered the social interpersonal skills necessary to work through these thoughts and feelings and control your impulses. So a lot of the skills that we teach you in treatment are those kinds of behavioral skills. How do I negotiate a romantic relationship? How do I deal with conflict with coworkers or friends or family? How do I deal with my own interpersonal conflict, right? What happens when people don't have those skills? Well, we see it all the time. There's these mass shootings. People don't know how to self-regulate. Now, that's not the only reason, but that's part of the problem. There's also depression. There's also isolation. There's lack of social connection. There's a million different reasons. And when people say, well, we're never going to let this happen again, some politician gets up there all shiny and it's not going to happen. The world is never going to the universe is not going to become a safe place. And there's no amount of policies that we can put in place to do that. Now, we can do things to help people, but don't be under the illusion that we can ameliorate these kinds of problems. They have existed for all time, and they will continue to exist in some form or fashion. They change form, they change shape. But that doesn't mean we don't work from a humanistic perspective to try to alleviate some of the suffering, to make some kind of social change. But death will always exist. Suffering will always exist. And anybody who tells you that they can fix it is lying. And don't ever forget that, because if you start believing that, when you work with clients and they relapse, or they don't make it through the program, or they die, and they will, some of them, if you don't have that understanding, I know it sounds harsh for me to tell you this right now, if you don't have that understanding, you're going to burn out. You're going to say, I can't do this work, because you expected everybody to get better. You expected everybody to stop using because they came to your group. You're not that powerful. And if you were, you should be a counselor. You should be, thrown in king of the world, because the reality is that we can't control some of those things. We can do things that can create an environment for positive change, but we cannot reach inside your mind and make you do something like a puppet. So know this going in. And then when something happens good, you tell your client, wow, you did such a great job. You own that. Not me. It wasn't me. And when they fail, you don't get mad at them. You're not disappointed, and they don't feel like you rejected them or took away your positive regard towards them or empathy. You're just like, okay, so you had a mistake. What are we going to do about it now? I mean, you're telling me you want to get better, but I keep seeing you go out and use. Help me understand that. I'm not mad at you. You go out and use. That doesn't affect my life. And if it does, then there's something wrong that I need to work through. Maybe I'm in recovery, and it pisses me off because it reminds me of myself, it reminds me of my brother who isn't in recovery, something. That's on you. And as a counselor, you better learn to stow that and to have it. You don't have to be perfect to be a counselor, but you have to be aware of your own stuff. And if you don't, you're going to be a bad counselor. And everybody who's ever been in treatment has had a bad counselor. And I have worked right alongside bad counselors. And I have made mistakes, and I have been a bad counselor. But I learned for some of the best. Dr. Hunter is one example of that, and a lot of other great men and women that have trained me to be one of the best counselors that you can be. And it's because I was trained by some really good people, and I took it very seriously. And I hope to pass that on to you guys. That's what I want to do. I want to create a whole wave of professionals that go out there and make a difference. I realized that working in private practice, or working in treatment, I could do that, but it was small. And I was like, I can do more in a different way. And that's my hope. That's my dream. And I hope we're getting there. Okay, so we talked about thinking about addiction in a new way. that things don't cause addiction in and of themselves, that addictions develop based upon interaction between our mind, body, our experiences, our social settings, and the properties of potential objects of addiction. So yes, there are more unhealthy objects and behaviors that we can interact with, so avoiding them can lower our risk for potential for addiction. But I will tell you, people's own minds are their own worst enemy, and that's the truth. And if we can help people to use their mind in a way, learn how to use their mind, just like we learned how to drive a car or use a computer, you can learn how to use your mind, to think when you need to think, to use rational thought when it's required, to feel when you need to feel emotion, to express your emotion when you need to communicate that to other people, but not to use one with the other. You know what I mean? If I use all emotion to make my decisions, like I don't want to get out of bed today. I guess I'm not, because I think about it, right? And I motivate myself to do it. If you're all emotion, you're just like a dog. That's the dog's brain. Just eat, sleep, sex, that's it. So understanding, and then recovery is working on mind-body connections, right? Spirit. Big part of recovery is developing some kind of spiritualization, some kind of understanding. Kim said to me earlier, I'm going to pick on her a little bit. She said, well, it's kind of weird. Sometimes I feel like I'm just learning all this stuff out of a book, just all this counseling theories and interventions. I said, yeah, but people find spirituality in a book too. So I don't see why it's any less relevant. And it's true. I mean, I wouldn't teach these courses online if I didn't think I was making an impact. And I got students telling me all the time how they're getting hired at treatment centers, how the board, which I went in front of to petition for this new program, told me, the president, Darlene Defer, said, I know when one of your students is standing in front of me for an interview, because she owns a treatment agency. She said, because when I ask them all these questions, they know the answer. And it's because I know what to give you to prepare you. I was going over my evaluations from fall, and there was a number of really nice compliments on there. I look for the negatives because I don't know, because I'm hard on myself sometimes. And a lot of complaints were there's too much work. It's too hard. It is hard. It is a lot. Sometimes you got to read 2 chapters a week. You get tests, exams, assignments. It's a lot. But it is through that structured, disciplined struggle that is going to help you emerge to be a stronger counselor and individual. And that's all we can do. You don't go to boot camp and join the military and they're like, hey, check it out, guys. We have like 6 PlayStations. Hang out here. We're going to have pizzas delivered. Beer's coming. You're going to be the best soldiers ever.
Right.
No, they put through physical and psychological stress, torture, to make them stronger. And that's how we grow as human beings. We need that. It is the genesis, that tension, that conflict is the genesis of our growth. And if anybody's been married here, they know that. They know they've had to grow if they want to stay married, right? Because it forces you to do things, sometimes positive, sometimes not. Okay, just to finish it up, because we're going to run out of time here, but I want to talk a little bit about special populations, and then I want to watch Dr. Hunter's. He's got 2 videos on there. They're about 2 minutes, and it's just him actually doing counseling, so you can kind of see what a master looks like. Military, you might be able to see very well. I just did a quick Google search. The DoD pulls in over $2 billion in gambling at overseas installations. You can't gamble mostly here. But think about, there's like 308 military bases around the world. You can gamble there. They got a lot of time on their hands and sometimes not a way to spend it because, where they're at. But there are video poker machines there. This is your vulnerable population. They're away from home. They don't have their social support. They're in a dangerous situation they might not want to think about. They've got time. A lot of times you have to, when you're done working, you're sitting around waiting for the next mission or if something comes along. All kinds of things happen. They're young. That's another risk factor, right? Making impulsive decisions and developing bad habits. This is why everybody drinks too much in college. And they tend to level off after they get out. So this is something to consider. And think about maybe we could develop policies that could change that, right? We don't have to have video poker machines on the military bases. people who have sustained significant trauma. So let's say you were abused, neglected, you were taken out of your home because of that kind of environment, and you were put into foster care, and maybe it was even worse, you know, and you grow up and you're 25 years old and you have a head full of terrible thoughts and feelings. And one of the things you notice is that when you play video poker at a super fast speed, if you've ever seen anybody do it really fast, they're gone. They're not there. They're in another place. They have found a way to manipulate their neurobiological system into that psychological numbing. And it feels good because I'm not thinking about that stuff for a little while. And I don't want it to end. Here's the problem. You stop gambling, it starts creeping up, right? This is why it gets there. Another is the aging population. Okay, people retire, they have money, they have time, they're losing, their loved ones are dying because of their age. They're facing increased medical problems and medical bills. So that desire to escape and numb increases. So these are things to consider when we're working with and doing assessments for individuals, is to be aware of this kind of behavior. Excuse me. Be aware of these populations, and there are some specific ones that are more vulnerable than others. That doesn't mean to be any good assessment should be able to weed this out, but it's something to consider. Okay, so we probably won't have a lot of time to talk about treatment interventions, but I do want to tell you about one thing that I noticed when I was working specifically with problem gamblers, and that was that we had this thing called the Life Story Project. And we had a 6-week intensive outpatient program. You basically came to group 3 or 4 hours a day. And then we would ask you to go to GA, which is Gambling Anonymous, twice a week. And then you could come to our aftercare session on Saturdays for like 2 or 3 hours. A lot of time. People are like, oh my God, it takes so much time. Well, guess what? You were spending all that time gambling before. So every hour you are in treatment or you are in intensive outpatient, you're saving money. Or you're not spending money that isn't yours anyway. And about week 4, we would do this thing called the Life Story Project. And you basically had to tell your life story from the time you can remember to today, including your problem gambling, in about 20, 25 minutes. So, people write it down. And one of the things that would emerge was they hadn't been gambling for 4 weeks. And people, or sometimes they stopped drinking, all kinds of things. Was after they told their life story, memories are malleable. They change. Our attitudes towards them change. You might remember something very fondly, then not, then again, fondly again. This happens when people die, right? Somebody dies, you hated them. You're like, that is so beautiful. And then they die, like, oh, he was a wonderful man. Beautiful person. They can't do it. They can't hurt you anymore. Like, it just seems to be that. But the understanding is that our thoughts about experiences change. Sometimes that was the worst thing that ever happened to me. I was brutalized, I was raped, I was beaten, whatever. But then you look back on it years later and you're like, you know what? I'm not saying I'm glad that stuff happened to me, but it made me who I am today. And it changed me. And once you're changed, you can't be unchanged. And that's like when people would tell this Life Story Project, they would get to it that they had a deeper understanding of their experience. And it was from a heroic pose, not a victim pose. I say, I overcame this. I became something. I became a real boy. I like to say that, like Pinocchio becomes a real boy. Because the expression and inspiration of love from your group, from your counselor, from your own self comes through. And a lot of times what I find is a lot of people come to me after their group and they're like, I've been doing really good. I want to find a way to give back. How can I become a counselor? And I knew how to become a counselor because I was a counselor. And then I would see the programs. I'm like, there's not enough really good training programs, honestly. And so I started teaching and I got roped into that. And then I got a full-time gig, and then I was at the university, and then I realized the rurals had very little in the way of training, and I came out here to do this. And I've been grateful for ever since. But one thing I want you to remember, and it's this quote from this Bill Mills' Olympic triumph, something that his dad told him. And I had heard this quote when I was working, because I'd always look for inspirational quotes to give to my group and stuff. And it says that it is the pursuit of a dream that heals a broken soul. I'm going to say it again because it's that important, is the pursuit of a dream that heals a broken soul. So if you can help your client find their dream, whether that's never gambling again because they want to be the best father or husband or a good citizen, or they want to become a problem gambling counselor or professor, if you can point somebody at a dream, because a lot of people who have sustained serious mental trauma do not have capacity for imagination and thought. Once they stabilize, we can start working on that. If you can't imagine things, it's hard to believe you can find a way out. And so along the process, I'm working with these clients. I see them for 6 weeks and they're gone. Maybe they relapse and we have to start over. I'm always trying to cultivate their own personal dream, their own myth, their own heroic experience, And when I did that, they take off on their own because we are wired towards growth, towards, aspiration. Human beings have always done that. We don't just live in the ground. We build a house, we build a civilization, we build a society, we build I used to have a friend who raced stock cars in high school, and I brought my girlfriend to the race, 16 years old. It's terrible. Like, it's a dirt track. The cars are kicking up exhaust. Your face is black if you're in the audience. There's dirt all over you. And she said, why do they do that? Why drive in a circle as fast as you can? They're trying to figure out what they can do. They're pushing themselves to the limit. It's scary as hell being in a stock car going 150 miles an hour. But they want to master their emotions. That's athletes too. It doesn't take a lot to hit a stick and a ball, but try to do it with 50,000 people watching you. There's something that changes there. And so these sports figures and these, they become our gladiators of our time, and they inspire us. But we can inspire our clients too in different ways, because not everybody wants to hit a ball with a stick. They've got other aspirations. But if you can find an inspiration for their aspirations, they're off. And usually that comes from something that fascinates them. You get a kid who likes dinosaurs or something, he becomes a paleontologist, right? Or you got some nerd who likes math problems and he becomes an astrophysicist. It is that fascination with things. And if you can't find something to be fascinated in, it's not the world's fault. It's because you won't let yourself see it. The world is perfect the way it is. It's just you have to make a little correction in your eye to see it for what it really is. Okay, so in problem gambling, I think we're almost out of time here. We might not get to the videos. Yeah, we got enough time. Something to consider is that there are financial considerations that I haven't really had to talk about, but you will have to develop specific treatment interventions that make considerations for that kind of behavior. Like something like protecting their money. Like one of the things we always did at problem gambling centers, bring in your player's card. And everyone would cut them up, and we had a little party, and everyone would cut them up. They're like, there's 1 million points on that. I'm like, yeah. Well, what does it cost you, right? And so we have this little ritual, and rituals are important. Rituals bind you to a belief. I make the sign of the cross, to bless myself, to commune with my God. Rituals bind you psychologically to a belief. When you all graduate, and God help you if you don't graduate from my program, you will take your tassel and you will turn it from the right to the left. The right-hand path is the path of instruction, the way of society. The professor, making sure you did the assignment right, that you got the right grade. The left-hand path is your own. And when you graduate, it is to say, I am no longer a student. I have now over, and I take on the responsibility of society. I put it on my back, and I deal with it. And you don't even know what you're asking for until you get it. Glenn and me, we're old enough to know now it's not worth it. But we should have been rock and roll stars instead of responsible adults. It's not as fun. But so I would also incorporate into my intervention some form of ritual, some thing that symbolized something. That in AA, it's a chip. At the end of our treatment programs, we had a certificate. People would say, I never did anything in my life except for finish 15 years in prison and this. And it meant something to them. And to some people, that's just a piece of paper Well, I got a piece of paper on my wall that says I can do all these things. And it means something to me. A ritual, it turns a man into a president, right? There's an inauguration. There's a witness. And they have some form of clergy, usually of their own specific faith, to help them on that. It turns a man or a woman into a wife or a husband. It changes you, and your attitude towards life and your own interpersonal psychology changes as a result of that. And so rituals, which our world is lacking, are so important. That's why rituals are good for kids too, you know, Santa Claus. Kids be good. I used to be good all year for Santa Claus. My 10th year was a terrible year. I found out it wasn't real. I was like, I can do whatever I want as long as nobody catches me. So these are important things to remember and to consider when you're working with individuals. We're trying to change the psychology of a mind, of a psyche, of a spirit. And psychology is the study of the soul. And that's what we're doing when we're working with these folks. And they are lacking desperately something that they need to hold on to. And as a clinician, you need to find a way to help them find it, whatever it is for them. It doesn't need, they can be completely opposite. If it works for them, I'm good with it. You know, it's not, as long as they're not hurting anyone else. Okay, so those are my references. So you can see how I did good APA style. I don't just talk the talk, I walk the walk, okay? Let's spend a few minutes. We just have just enough to watch these videos from Dr. Hunter, and then we can dismiss the group. I wish we had more time for questions. But if you don't mind staying after, I don't mind either. Let me load this up here. Oops. How do we do that? Hi. That is not what I meant to do. Oh, I see. I don't know how to fix this. Stop video. There we go. Okay. So, can you guys still see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. We have 3 videos, they're a few minutes each. So here's Dr. Hunter in his glory. He's in, this is the old problem gambling group room that I used to work out of. So it's kind of fun to watch for me too.
Hi, my name is Doug. I'm a pathological gambler, and I am living proof that if you walk in here and keep your mouth shut and your ears open, you can gain a life, because I'm also an alcoholic and a drug addict. The last time I used drugs was September 22nd, 2007. Last time I had a drink was October 7th of 2007. The last time I made a bet was October 8th, 2007 at 10 a.m., half an hour before I walked into the intensive outpatient program from the Union Center. My last meeting was last Tuesday, the 7:30 meeting at Grace in the Desert. My next meeting will be tonight. I also went to aftercare on Saturday, which some of the people who are in NIOP now, as you move on, I highly recommend that. It has become the linchpin of my recovery. I kind of end my week with aftercare and begin my new week with aftercare, and it really is a good pivot point. I have no urges to gamble now. Today I feel happy. What I learned in this room and what I continue to learn in this room and in GA meetings all over the valley is how to deal with life on life's terms. This program not only brought me out of my addiction, allowed me to look at myself as I was presenting myself to the world.
Okay. So before I start this next video, what did Dr. Hunter do? He listened intently. Yes, thank you. He listened. So important. You think you can just check out. I saw movie where the psychologist was like eating a sandwich during the street. You don't want to do that. Okay? You want to pay attention. Give all your focused attention. It can be easier than you think, but it takes energy and it takes focus and compassion. And if you've got things going on in your own head because you haven't stowed your stuff, well, I don't know what that is.
Hey, welcome back, guys, to the forest of Belgium. Today is a special day because I've attached some cameras to my friend we will call Susho. He's in the German Special Police Force, which is in ways comparable to the American SWAT police, and today we're going to watch him in first person destroy some airsoft players.
Before we get started, we want to give a quick shout out to this week's sponsor, the exceptional mobile game called YGames.
If you're like me and you enjoy the old school strategy games like Age of Empires,
Okay, I got it.
the conference is about to end.
Okay, that's okay. We're going to watch this anyway.
In recovery, what you are on the inside is the only thing you're ever going to hold is bulletproof. The only thing to get out, there's some power.
Sorry.
You are on the inside is the only thing you're ever going to hold is bulletproof. The only thing you're ever going to hold is fireproof and outside influence proof and can't be taken. Everything you have that can't be taken from you is on the inside in your recovery, Daniel, give me one that you're really proud of on that list. God forbid you get sick, you're young and healthy, so I'm picking you as my example. But if you find out tomorrow that you've got some horrible, deadly disease, then forbid. If you get sick tomorrow, I don't feel totally responsible. If you find out tomorrow that you've got some horrible disease, guess what? You're still in charge of how it's done. There's nothing that can, in your recovery, there's nothing that can take from you that which you're not willing to give up. Just one to be proud of. If you get framed for murder, God forbid, thrown in the dungeon, you're still in charge of that spirit. You're still in charge of that warrior spirit that you need. There's nothing outside of us that can take away that which we're not willing to give up. There's some power.
Okay, I think the video is a little bad, but you can kind of see where he's getting at, right? He's trying to evoke these their spirit, you know, like. And in group, a lot of times is an opportunity to talk about things like, what am I going to do? How am I going to control myself when there's things outside of me? And he's giving the lesson is that you are always in control. And that belief is powerful. And the more you practice it, the more that ritual binds you to that belief and the stronger you become. The more you don't practice it, the ritual is what? What? Yeah. That, I mean, it nulls it, right? So if I say, if every time you get mad at me, I go out and use, my ritual belief is, if she gets mad at me, I can't control my emotions and I have to use. But if she gets mad at me and I say, you know what, that's fine, you can get mad, I'm not going to use, I'm going to go talk to my sponsor, I'm going to, journal, I'm going to take a walk, I'm going to do any of the number of coping skills that I know how to do. That is me practicing my belief and acting out my ritual. And my ritual binds me to belief. Who's got kids in here? Got a kid? You going to murder your kid ever? No. Under no circumstance. That's your belief, right? Some people do, right? I don't recommend it, but it happens. And the thing is, some people are like, there's nothing that's going to make me kill my own kid, no matter what. But what if this? So we can prove that those outside influences have a limit, right? And he's trying to tap into that deeper understanding about who we are and what we're willing or not willing to do. Last video. Hopefully the screen is still being shared. I don't know if that's. Somebody has their hand up. Okay, we can't do that. This is a 45-second video by Macho Man Randy Savage. He was a great hero to me when I was growing up. I used to love watching WWF. And I want to leave you with this little bit of wisdom today, and thank you for spending some time with me today.
Okay, your middle name is Macho, but I'm wondering if you ever cry. You ever has Macho Man ever cried?
Yeah, it's okay for macho men to show every emotion available right there, you know, because I've cried 1,000 times, I'm gonna cry some more. But I've soared with the eagles and I've slithered with the snakes and I've been everywhere in between. And I'm gonna tell you something right now. There's one guarantee in life, that there are no guarantees, yeah. And you understand?
I don't know what happened. Oh, the call ended. You guys aren't going to be able to hear the rest of it. Sorry. Yeah, so let me close this.